We're resuming the Hastings on Hudson Board of Education regular meeting for March 14th, 2023, returning from executive session. We sort of streamlined this evening because we have a lot to get to. So we're actually going to open up with, on the agenda number 2, public comment. So. Hi, how are you?
Hello, thank you. I'll be brief but meaningful. My name is Dorothy Nagel. I live at 19 Terrace Drive. I'm here just as a representative of the many people who were behind a letter of gratitude to the district, and I'm here just to read that letter into the public record. As it stood when we sent the letter to the Board of Education on February 27th, there were more than 500 people who had signed. We, the undersigned, all members of the Hastings on Hudson community, are coming together to express our deep support and gratitude for the district's work on culturally responsive sustaining education. The adoption of District Policy 105 on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of the district's efforts to educate our students in a way that supports a community of equity for LGBTQIA+ families and families of color. At a time when the day-to-day demands on our time and attention, not to mention the ongoing crises in the news cycle, compete for our energy, we can forget to be vocal about how thankful we are for each initiative the district puts forth. The intent of this letter is to redress this and to express our strong belief that culturally responsive sustaining education, in accordance with New York State guidelines, is a fundamental component of our students' education, both to create a safe, respectful environment for all and to further our students' growth into aware and compassionate citizens of the world. Some of us signing this letter have children whose sense of safety in the school community depends on these programs. All of us believe that an awareness of the experiences of those around us, a knowledge of the unseen burdens carried by many in society, and an understanding of how to treat others with empathy and respect are essential components of a 21st century education. We are deeply grateful to the building leadership, our district-wide administration, individual school administration, educators, guidance, support staff, and all of the other leaders in our district who are actively working to honor our commitment to equity. We recognize that this work is never complete, and as we look ahead with our district staff and leaders to the ongoing efforts that equity requires, we pledge our continued and dedicated support. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for the public. Thank you. Item number 3 is going to be posted material, which is the State of the District mid-year update. Are we doing any pullouts from that? Yeah? Okay.
So just to echo what Alex's board president said, we streamlined tonight in part because you all as a board met last week, and in a little less than 2 weeks you'll meet again. So we felt that let's just kind of cut to the chase, if you will. The mid-year State of the District report has been before you actually for almost a month. It's been sitting there for you to look at from February 28th. So we're going to assume you read it. And we're going to assume the public read it. I know some of the teachers read it because they got to me with very helpful comments. But let me just hit the beginning and the end of it quickly, and then Melissa Szymanski may want to add in a few points, but then we'll open it up for any sorts of questions. To anyone's memory, this is only the second year in a row that a document such as this has appeared. We did this 1-2, if you will, last year, a mid-year and an end of year. There seemed to be good following and favor for it. It is substantially written for me by the various people listed in it. I do pull it all together. I do edit it. So I own all those errors. The great writing belongs to others, and I'll just take credit for any of the mistakes, redundancies, etc. If there is a subjective quality to this, I want to admit that up front, but I think that's okay. It's a qualitative document. Last year we had more quantitative pieces in it. You had just recently seen quantitative data from Melissa, and at the end of the year you'll have some more quantitative data. But I think this qualitative statement, reflective and yes subjective, but as I'll share in a second, really helps us look at what we're doing and take a moment to see where we can do better. So the document is organized, you saw it, it's by each building, so if you will, from the school level up. The lead departments are included. This mid-year, we did include athletics and PE. We wove into the report the music and theater and arts that are so significant here in Hastings. You may say, if you keep this going, Bill, could you explicitly be more explicit in a section about music, theater, and arts? That may be a fair comment. And then we ended with some broad departmental looks from special education, and then Melissa's looking district-wide from a curriculum and instruction standpoint. And I will say up front, as it does here, and I looked at it again today, and if you write and you go back and look at what you wrote, you go, oh my goodness, I guess I could edit that. The portrait's mentioned a lot in here, and I almost thought that I forgot to take it out a little bit. But the main point, maybe in the repetition, is we're hoping soon that in the future, any such documents will be framed for you by the portrait. And we will do a little update on that for you a little later. Melissa will. But that really will, we hope, become the organizing piece for us. In the conclusion, and I can't help but talk about the world game of football or soccer, there is a great quote that was said after an English Premier match. The commentator says, "My, what a match of lots of industry, very little product." And I won't pretend to have an accent. But I turned that on its head a bit to say this report should show that there's an immense amount of industry going on here in the Hastings district, thanks to our teachers, thanks to our staff, and a lot of product. There is some aspect of process report here, but there is product. And not to be lazy, but I said close readers, I'm not going to repeat the whole report for you, but there are headlines here that matter, that really show how far-reaching the work is. There's strategic prioritization and planning. I'm on page 24 of the report. And that planning is both district-wide, school, and departmental. Academic development, or what I like to call intellectual development, is underway, curricular-wise, programs and courses. Social emotional well-being is significant as you look across this report. Health and fitness is significant. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and thank you for the wonderful comment and letter that did come to me, and I did not respond. I'll call that busyness. The school culture, and both culture in general, but for schools featured in here. Safety and security. As some of you have heard me say, I don't like having safety and security as my first priority as a superintendent, but it really has to be in this day and age. And then lastly, professional learning. 4 administrators, faculty, and staff are woven throughout this document. So not noted in this report, which I stress here, is I really do believe that everyone working here is really deeply committed to always doing better. In education, I think we call that continuous improvement. I think plain English is we just want to always do better. So we look at what we do, and I really have a sense that the people that work here for your children, they're constantly saying, how can I do better? I may be doing well, but I can do better. And then lastly, again, it's another mention of the portrait. I'm encouraged about that process. It's truly from all of us, for all of us. But that will be the framework we'll use going forward in these mid-year and end-of-year documents. So let me stop there, and Melissa, I know you might add a few things, then we'll open it up for discussion.
Sure. I just wanted to echo that the portrait is already alive and well, and it's still being developed. We are in our second round of action step planning coming up, so that work is going well with a second group. So we had a core team that developed the portrait, and I know that was a presentation to the board, and now we're in that action step planning committee mode. So, side by side with that, there's infographics creation that's happening, and so one of our students, one of our high school students, Mac Dojic, has been developing an infographic and working together with Chris Yerkes, our webmaster, and with Jackie Saviano. So we've had some iterations of that, so that's in motion. And while we are creating those action steps, we have been able to, in our curriculum review cycle work, already begin to leverage some of the elements of the portrait that need to be front and center when we're thinking forward. So for example, I referenced the portrait within a portrait, which are the competencies that we want to see our learners developing as they're moving through the system. And they are empowered, inquisitive, inventive, empathetic, bold, and collaborative. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight one of the many things that are within this document on page 21, which is some mathematics work that's been happening. The Hillside Mathematics Committee has been in a phase 1, an inquiry process around let's take a look at what we're doing. Let's take a look at the standards. Let's take a look at the practices. Let's take a look at peer-reviewed research on how students learn mathematics best and that they're invigorated around math. Let's take a look at the portrait, and let's put all of that together and see what we're noticing. So I won't reiterate what's already in writing here, but I will build off of that. So where this all left off, this is the work that's been happening in mathematics within the context of the committee. The committee became very curious to explore other resources. So there were a series of presentations that happened from vendors that the committee members were interested in bringing in. So they identified some people that they wanted to hear from. Those presentations happened, but I just want to note that while that was happening, or just prior rather, we developed a shared vision for mathematics resource that we felt was really important. So a lens that we were looking at mathematics resources for students through. And that included strong differentiation. So we were looking at intervention. We were looking at enrichment opportunities for students. We were looking at developmentally appropriate formatting. We wanted to make sure that the resource that we were working with was constructivist, that it applied to practice, that there was a depth of understanding, there was exploration, there was clear purpose for why students would be engaging in mathematics, that we wanted it to be hands-on and multimodal. We thought it was important to have a digital component, both for students and for teachers, though that wouldn't be the primary, but that would be incorporated because that's students' world. We wanted to ensure that whatever we were working with, we were thinking about opportunities for professional learning. We wanted a strong scope and sequence, making sure we were vertically aligned. There was a consistent lesson structure. There was emphasis on mathematical practices, how we do math, not just on the content. We were interested in interdisciplinary connections, vocabulary, fluency, making sure it was accessible to English language learners, and of course those portrait competencies that I began with. So we vetted these different resources through those. That was the criteria. And the committee narrowed it down to 2. And then we went to some local schools to see them in action with students. And the whole team went, the whole committee went, and we had a chance to talk to teachers, see students working with it. We then went back, and there was one clear resource that was standing out a bit more than the others. So teachers started to pilot it in their classrooms. Then we came back to the committee and we started talking about it. And so yesterday, there was some discussion among the committee about which way we wanted to go. Do we want to keep what we have and augment alignment to the standards and to our beliefs and our values? Or do we want to think about making a shift? And unanimously, every single teacher in the room wanted to make the shift. And so we announced to Hillside today that we will be moving to Reveal, and it is a wonderful resource. We're very excited about it. It allows all of those things that we just talked about, and in addition, it creates opportunities for teacher choice. So lesson delivery format can be done in one of 2 ways, and one is a more activity-based format, and one is a more guided directive format. And depending on the student need, depending on realities of being a teacher, sometimes you get hit with an assembly and your 1-hour math block becomes a shorter math block. It allows people to pivot, and it really provides lots of different resources in hand, including slides, and still allows teachers to be the experts that they are, to create, to play. And we're very, very excited. So I did want to mention that because that's not sitting within that, and that is hot off the presses as of this afternoon.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting, to have a process that involves a lot of people that comes up with sort of a novel result, sort of an endorsement that it's a good process, because you could see, 9 times out of 100, it just drives towards what the status quo is. So good to hear.
It was a really fun process. I would like to formally recognize and thank the committee members. And it's been quite a fun journey, to be honest. We've been really having some rich discussions. We've been playing with mathematics as educators. We've been engaging with the math, and we've been getting really messy with all of it and having some really difficult, good conversations. And, to add to it, the current mathematics resource, Eureka, is no longer, they've shifted to Eureka Squared, so there would be a change no matter what. Although it wasn't a radical reinvent on the Eureka end, we felt that there was a more student-centered option that was better for kids. So that's the way we went.
Excellent. Thank you.
I just
sure.
want to recognize the growth mindset that is going on here. Dr. Makesi actually mentioned that as well in your report, that all of us, even including the community, embracing this growth mindset, that we don't carry all the body of knowledge that we need in order to make the choices that lead to the progress that we all seek. So this was a very evident growth mindset opportunity that was embraced really well, and I just want to shine some light on it. So thank you.
Questions or comments regarding the mid-year state of the district?
I have a comment. I appreciate all the hard work that was put into this. I have to say that I'm a little disappointed, notwithstanding the letter that was sent by 500 plus people, that there was so much of a focus on gender, diversity, restorative practices, race, et cetera, but I barely saw anything about math, ELA, like where we really are. Coming out of the pandemic, we know that there's a lot of learning loss for all of our students, and I would have liked to have seen much more about academics in this document to see where we are, because I think we can include all of the other stuff, which is important, but for me, the academics part is really key here.
Any other questions or comments?
I actually have a question. And it's on page 11, and it's in the special education section, number 2, under the goal areas, and it's specifically with the goal of evolve the capacities of the director of special education from chairing meetings to the adaptive work of special education leadership, including building the capacity of special education teachers, teaching assistants, and teacher aides, and strengthening the continuum of services for students with IEPs. Now, we have a new person who's joined us in the administration for special ed, and I was just curious to hear if there was any detail that could be provided in terms of whatever progress you folks feel, and that could be directed to either of the two of you in terms of the growth of that area, because I do think that since the district has made a commitment over the past several years to really provide services which fortify students who are classified, I just kind of want to know what progress we've seen made up to this point, recognizing it's only been a few months.
I can hit a few things broadly, and then Melissa may join in. Let me preface everything by, there's really no way in that question not to talk about some individuals, so I'm not going to use names, but in a sense we are. So but fortunately, being close to Mariangela Sanchez, our newest member, as well as where Laura is and Tesfa, I think they're going to be comfortable with what I say. I think first off, the placement of the new assistant director at Hillside, while she's looking district-wide, that placement there has been a benefit to Hillside in terms of all kinds of work as it relates to supporting Hillside generally, and specifically as it relates to gen ed and also sped and inclusion. She's an expert administrator coming from, believe it or not, a more complicated place in Hastings, where, in the New York City system as a psychologist overseeing 75 psychologists. She's very used to all kinds of challenges, and in our leadership team meeting, she's often the person who says, subtly and quietly, well, okay, let's really talk, please, if you've got things to worry about here. So she really sets a great tone. Very specifically, she is working on some important ideas for us as it relates to no-cost ways to broaden talent for support for our students. We're looking at some possible, which include some help to staff, but looking at bringing more of a student-based psychologist support, maybe some work around the social worker realm. We're not sure on that yet, so that's very tangible. She's also then allowing Laura to be much more directly involved with some student work, family work, but then she herself is picking up a great deal of that, and that's also freed up Tesfa more. So in terms of kind of measurables, that's hard to point to, but I think in terms of the degree of support for all of those working within SPED and more generally, that's been a plus. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to add to that
Yeah,
at
so
all.
I'll also add, I can echo everything that Bill just said, but also, she's a seeker. So she's also, as a new addition to Hastings, it's really a wonderful thing, and this goes for anyone. You're coming in on a balcony rather than on the dance floor, and then you get onto the dance floor after having had the bird's eye view. And with the role comes the opportunity to be seeking grants and to be looking at other opportunities that can be augmenting things that we have going on here. So she's been a welcome addition. We've been hearing nothing but positive things about the role. So I'm careful to speak about the role and not necessarily the person, but we are delighted to be able to have the additional support and also the input, even through the lens of the Special Education Advisory Committee, which, since this was written, we are now in the action step planning and getting ready to think about some pilots of some of those more concrete action steps that have been developed. So has been a key contributor with all of that as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding mid-year seat of the district?
I'll say that I think it's, just think it's a great practice. I see a previous board member here. We're talking about a mid-year review, and we've never done a detailed one like this since I've been on the board. You may have remembered some in the past, but, and I think that, I think in many ways it's serving its purpose. I mean, Doreen brings up a point. That's a great point. We all have a variety of opinions on that point, but if we didn't have the mid-year review, we wouldn't have a place to have that conversation. So I think what's so important about things like this is even if they don't represent everything that we think is where we should or shouldn't focus, we have to continue to do it and have those conversations, because I think one of the reasons why we did this, we spoke about it last year, Bill, was that we didn't have one central place to kind of capture the thinking. And sometimes doing that, you capture some narrative storylines that maybe are different than we all think should be being discussed. So I think it's so important that we keep doing this practice. I also love the structure of it, the idea of goals, where we hit, and I know you didn't use the word where we miss, but where we hit and where we need to continue to grow. The one thing I would say is it's a public school district, it's hard. I come from the private sector, so you can be a little bit more pointed about where we missed than maybe people want to do in public, but I would encourage, a continued finer point on some of those things. And maybe that's happening behind the scenes, but it really does help. Going back to the idea of growth mindset or a learning organization, that's the only way we can become a learning organization, to really have those. So without pointing at anyone in specifics, and who knows if and when we can get there, the idea that we can really celebrate those wins and really focus on the struggles or challenges, I think it's really powerful. So I think it's a great framework and setup, so thank you to the whole administration for doing that.
I thank you so much. I think that Doug very much captured a lot of my thinking that I was trying to make it succinct, because I know I talk a lot, but I wanted to point out something that is positive, because again, all these inputs are a way for us to continue our growth mindset, but something that is positive, that is personal to me, which was the learning differences piece, which is another form of marginalized group, which is connected to the special ed that my colleague Sylvia mentioned about. And so, I was waiting till the board comment, but I think it's the right time. So Hillside had their Lion King musical, woohoo! And it was amazing. I'm sure it will come up later on. And I know I've shared this publicly, but my son, who could not speak till he was 5 years old, he couldn't speak or even understand when he was spoken to, was in the play and spoke, and he's still in that phase. I promise you, I did not have that confidence for him to do that. I'm the mother, and I didn't think he was ready. I was telling the teachers, what are they thinking? Letting him say lines and sing. And yes, I'm from the motherland, but those singing language thing, I could not help him, I kid you not. And so I mean, I know I talk so highly about Hillside because that's where I have a child, but it really showed me in action the work that is going on. And I want to say this because some people think because you're on the board, but prior to being on the board or even actively being doing community activity, my husband and I did not want to, we were worried bringing our son here because of such a huge delay. And I think at that time it was Laura who was the principal, and she said, he'll be fine, bring him, and we were worried, and we are so happy we did that. And we've seen progress way before I even assumed I would be sitting here. So this is not because of positionality, because some people assume that's it, but this is something that has been realistic. I know it's not the story for everyone, but for the most part, I love the growth mindset. That's why I wanted to highlight. I'm getting emotional, but I'll be quiet. That's why I wanted to highlight it. So thank you. I just want to say thank you.
I just want to make one comment on what Doug said. I appreciate what you said, Doug, and when you say that, everybody has different ideas of what should be included, I hope I'm not the only person on the board who believes that the main reason for the schools is academic learning. I mean, I feel like that is why we are here, that's why our students are here, and I don't think we should forget that or put that aside or bury it on page 21 of a document about where we are with our school and our mid-year report. Perhaps I am alone, but I hope I'm not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the mid-year state of the district?
Well, Doreen, you're not alone. I agree with you. And I do, I mean, way up high called it subjective, then also said it's an exercise for reflection, and it's the back and forth, and the board may want to talk more later about this in other weeks, which is fine, keep coming back to it, but this is the exact setup we get. I'm not stealing Doug's line, but he said it better. This enables us to have these conversations. The academic is woven through here in many ways. There'd been the more quantitative report earlier. But as you know, looking at quantitative data is fairly new in Hastings, and doing that systematically, and I think Hastings should be fine with that, because it actually has helped us understand that we did not have a lot of learning loss here. And if we didn't have the data we had, we would have been stuck in that discussion, which brings us to growth, to say we can still do better, right? And looking at metrics and not be scared about that. Now that's still a ways to go here. But so I agree with you, we need to, going forward, be as much centered on the academic. I really do like the concept of intellectual, because I can be great with books and terrible with my mind. So but it's then how are we measuring that and how are we sharing that with the community? And so I think that's a good critique back. And this is a document we do as best we can want to keep alive, at least with the leadership team, to say, you largely wrote this. Yeah, I edited it, but you largely wrote it. Now let's reflect on that. Where in future iterations can we be more focused definitely on that academic?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I will add, and I think you do agree with this, is that if we're not strong socially, emotionally, if we're not strong in other ways, we're not going to be strong on the academic. And anyone who reads the Friday letters, I'm not sure who's reading them anymore, knows that I spent 3 days in New Canaan this past week and talk about results, but I put our results with them anywhere. But they for 7 years have been systematic at looking at wellness and well-being. Not speaking out of turn here to say you've got a community that's so driven, forget the college, and all the tensions and anxieties there as we talk with students and everyone else. You got that. And then you got over here where they're saying, hey, our well-being is good. And anyone who's a parent in this room who's got a kid anywhere near the college process knows this is a time of high anxiety. So how could you get the two truths to believe? Intense pressure, and then the well-being, and that they've been able to stitch together for 7 years a real systematic approach to paying attention to well-being, so that then you're getting that intellectual and academic output. And we have that, right? But I'm saying that we have to keep an eye on that. So so.
And I'm not suggesting
No,
putting pressure on our students to get
yeah,
into like
yeah.
Yale and Harvard. That's
'Cause
not my point.
They put it on themselves anyway,
Yes,
so then
right.
it's trying to manage that.
Right, and I'm not
So-
saying it's one or the other.
Yep.
And our curriculum review cycle is actually helpful in thinking about that, like what phase each of those content areas is.
Right.
And I know, I was able to speak to that in my section, but it is definitely something that it's all important. The academics are very important, the social emotional the intellectual is important, the competencies are important, all of it. So point taken that we need to make sure
And we'll
our
work on
foot's
that.
on the
It's a
gas
good point.
pedal across the board.
So can I ask a clarifying question? And this is helpful for me. When I go through the document, probably because I've been in education for 20 years, I'm able to easily see the connection. Like I saw the learning pattern, and I use my son as an example. So presenting even individuals, I mean, of course, we all know this is school, so it has to be school. How would you, in your perception, view a document like this for you to think it's still pointing to academics? Because I personally thought it is, but probably to you, your perception doesn't see it that way. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, the titles were, not necessarily about academic learning. They don't start, the individual school ones don't start with what the academics are. And my experience as my kids get older is that there's so many kids here who have tutors. There's,
That's true.
whether it's because they don't know what they're doing in their class, or because their parents want them to get ahead in their class. Which is ultimately inequitable for people who can't afford tutors. I don't want to live in a district where our kids are doing well because half of them have tutors. So I think that that's a really important point here, and we have to be fair to the people who can't afford the tutors. So that's one aspect of why I want to understand the academics. My experience of what's happening in the middle school is very different from what's written in this document. And the experience that I hear from other parents is different from what's written in this document. And so that's another, the perception of what's happening and what the reality of what's happening are two different things for me in this document without going into a lot of detail.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on our mid-year state of the district? All right, thank you to everybody for preparing that as well. We're going to move on to a discussion of our unused inclement weather days and have a thought about setting the two of the days that would be upcoming. So how do we want to open this? Do we want to?
Yeah, so, sorry.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
usually not speechless. Significant topic for the board. We've been, since January 24th, and that means the community as well, because in my view, when we report to the board, we're reporting to the community. And those who, the materials are up. I know many, many people look at them even if they're not in the room. So on the 24th, we put out initial ideas on what we just determined now as give back, because per the agreement with the HTA, any unused inclement weather days are returned for days off for the students and the staff. And we typically have had, not what we have now, only one snow day out or inclement weather day. We thought we'd get one today and we didn't. And so we have 5 left. And so as of the 24th, we looked at some dates to share with you. We are recommending tonight that you do make a decision on at least 2. And that'd be Friday, March 31st, and then Monday, April 10th. So you'd extend the spring break. And we would urge you to make that decision tonight so that families and staff can plan. The 31st is not far off. We also provide a second set of decisions. You may want to make those at the April 18th meeting on the 3 remaining days. The 23rd of June, making that a day off, so your end of school day would be the 22nd, coinciding with graduation for the high school. Friday, May 26th, and then Tuesday, May 30th, so you'd extend your Memorial Day weekend. You could decide tonight to approve all of those with the substantial caveat that anytime we have an inclement weather day, we would subtract back one of those days off, probably working in reverse, depending on when that inclement weather day occurs. So put very simply, we do have before you the recommendation, you make a decision at least on that first set and consider whether you're prepared to make a decision on the second set. One final comment, wisdom in waiting till the 18th is that we may get some more weather coming at us that may require inclement weather. May require us to take a day off.
Excuse me, Dr. McCarthy.
Sure.
If we vote on both of these and there is an inclement weather day, what happens? So then we have to come back and pull a day, and we'll choose to pull a day back? How does that work?
Well, I think you'd want to do is give authority to your superintendent to make the decision. You may give some guidelines there. You may say, for example, if it will be between now and March 31st, maybe you pull from those first 2 days. My recommendation is you pull from later, because that allows families and all the rest to plan and be aware.
But we would pull a day. We wouldn't say it's these, plus then we have an inclement weather day.
No, you would
Okay.
subtract.
Got it.
And
Okay.
I think it makes sense, and Marina and Melissa are smarter than me, so they might say, well, actually, you might want to go the other way. But I think the chances of us using all 5 are slim. We only have once in the last 11 years had 5 snow days, and then another 4 days, and I think the average is 2.5.
2.8.
2.8 snow days, so we're going to have some give-back days here. So that's why you want to start giving them back.
Yeah,
And that's why, we structured the recommendation this way.
got it. I also want to say that I totally understand how difficult this is for you guys and to figure out which days, and I feel bad for the, working parents in our district who have to then find childcare for these days when they don't have off from work, but their kids have off from work. And I recognize that you put it around the holidays thinking it would be the least disruptive, so I appreciate your thoughtfulness into this.
So I think we want to consider, what's the read on?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
think we should go ahead and vote on all 5 days. I think sending a clear signal to the community would be helpful. I mean, I don't know how many times they're going to misread a letter out, but I think if that's something, it seems like we give the authority to obviously pull it back, and we're in the middle of March here with the next 7 days not looking like any weather. I think those 5 days were well chosen. I don't want to have any misconception here. This is a very unfortunate event that I think a couple of us have been speaking against. There's no doubt about it. Kids are safer in schools. High schoolers and middle schoolers are safer when in schools. And closing for 5 days, as we are about to, is not beneficial to our students' academics or their socializing or depression or the possible bad decisions they'll be making on those days. Our elementary students need education and daycare, and these 5 days are not what anybody on the board discussed in any meeting. We only discussed this during a COVID time when we were doing remote learning. Nobody in this board that I've heard from ever was discussing continuing this or expected this to be continuing, and yet it is going to continue for the next multiple years moving forward. Given that, I would push back on even calling them what they are, give back days. It should be clear to everybody in our community that very few schools do this at all, and only one other school even does this at the level we do it. There'll be no give-back days in Dobbs Ferry. There'll be no give-back days in Irvington. There'll be no give-back days in Ardsley. Closing because you had a normal winter without the storms during the week has never been done in our school district in the 20 years that I remember until COVID came. But moving forward, as I said last time, our school calendar is a misrepresentation. We do not have 182 days scheduled for next year. We will be doing this again next year if we have snowstorms. We will have the fewest days in the river towns. Our kids will have the most days where they are out of school. Parents will continue to have to do this again. But these days are well chosen. These 5 days are well chosen. I think we should put it out there and move on from this topic. if weather switches, let's just give the authority, as Bill described, to get it done, to make sure we have it, obviously not going below the minimum of 176 days. We would have to add them back. So I think it's time to vote on both the items. I don't see why we want to have this topic again. It's embarrassing to me personally to have to be discussing this.
Anyone else have a read on if they're comfortable voting on the whole slate with the caveat that obviously Bill has the authority to change it as needed?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay with it?
Any other questions or comments about it before we move forward?
Just one question, because we refer to it as snow days, but what happens if there was like an emergency power outage or something? Would that
That's
count
covered
towards
by
that as
this.
well? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I've used the inclement weather days, or emergency days is what they're actually talked about. So any reason we're not open, which could occur. So,
Yeah, we used it, 2 years ago, we used one day in September, the first day of school, when
For
we had
the
the
flooding.
hurricane, the flooding. And then we've used it in the spring because of,
power
storm.
outages, as you
Right.
said, any reason we can't open would be used. These days are applied to that.
So emergency days, right?
Yep, thank you, that's a better phrase.
Anyone else? All right, so is there a motion to approve the 5 give-back days as listed in this document?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Alex, do we want to be clear about the protocol if we do have to go to them?
Want me to spell it out, you mean?
Yes.
Yep.
Go back,
Please.
if we have to go backwards.
It brings us
Please.
pretty close to going below the state minimum. So in that sense, it would be really within our rights to add back any day. We could always
All right.
change the calendar, right?
No, what I'm saying is, do we want to be clear on how we would approach the 5? if
Okay,
we-
right. So let's say, so right now, we're setting potential for 5, we used one snow day, so we have 5 left over, or snow day, inclement weather day. We're setting a schedule for 5. And, I mean, my preference, if we're going to pull back, if we had to pull back a first one, for me, it would not be that Friday, June 23rd day, because I think that's about the least painful day. The definite distinction, the days that are in April and May, especially in the high school, are very serious academic time, and, once you get into
What
June.
about the thought about us trying not to get involved in that area of administration and
But they would know.
authorizing the
No, but, I mean,
superintendent?
Doug was sort of asking for perspective
Would
on
you,
that.
I mean, the authority to, authorize the superintendent, is that where you were going? Or
Yeah,
you
I
wanted
think
us
there
to
could be-
talk about the days?
But, I think there could be value in Bill just hearing it's
Sure.
your call eventually, but I think in just hearing our thinking behind it. to
No,
me,
sure.
it's
Got it.
there.
That's
Sure,
what you
I
were
mean-
saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
I think there's a clear value difference between a last day of school that's non-academic by any definition, that a lot of students wouldn't be here, and a day that's, in April and May. I think a lot of teachers would appreciate as well, having the time that they need in April and May. So, yeah, I mean, it's a small thing, but I'd be, that June 23rd would stay in until the last, from my perspective.
I would add that, being that those were all selected days that were possibilities, just having the operational body doing the day-to-day, recognizing the need based on, because they have to factor in instructional hours, like other days and all those things. So although on the surface, it may look like these days may be more appropriate, but operationally, it may be a little bit bothersome depending on where they are. So I think that it's a good thing we already voted on the fact that we are giving that flexibility within these parameters. But it's good for us to also know our reasoning behind it as well, so.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, just to point one thing out, even on the first 2 days, the high school musical is going to lose 2 rehearsals, for on the 2 days that we're adding. So there's always, in the time of the year especially, everywhere you touch something. So there's no easy one, really.
Yeah, and we did factor in here because that up top, we'd have to work on this with staff and something to look through. There is the possibility some pre-scheduled activities might still need to occur, but we've tried to plan accordingly. I mean, there is a staffing issue there, but, you know. The custodians are still there. Yeah. Yeah, custodians are still here. So, you know, we do have a little flexibility on some of that. But what I've written down here is I think I would be, if we have to start, the first inclement day we'd lose, we're gonna try and definitely protect 623. I think the next most high priority to protect is May 26th. Third would be May 30th. I think then we want to then, the 31st and 10th, we may know by then what's possible. But I think we've got to give those up if we have an inclement weather day by then, because us using all 5 is pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
But is that?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Can I bring something up? Maybe this isn't the place to discuss it right now, not the place, but the time to discuss it. Given that in the past, what did we look at the calendar for the past decade, the past 2 decades?
11 years.
11 years, we used once we used 6 days, once
we used 5.
we've never used 6.
We've never used 6.
We've once used 5, we've once used 4.
Right.
And then the rest, I mean, should we consider in the calendar talking about adding, like, taking off days in September, October, November, December of next year? Like, when we have to look at the calendar for next year?
Pre-burn?
Totally. So we're not stuck with the end of the year when, to your point, is when all the testing happens and all the kids, that it's really important for the kids to be in school. I'm just putting it out there. We probably don't want to have that discussion tonight, but
No, it's a thought. though.
something to discuss.
No, it's a thought, for sure. Any other, we voted already, but any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Moving on, business items. Are there any questions or comments about business items 1 through 9?
I just want to mention that item number 9 was recently added. That's the results of the bid we just opened yesterday for the Reynolds Field work. And that was the money on the last board agenda you shifted to cover this repair. The bid did come in a bit higher, but we're hoping we can manage the difference in the budget than we had anticipated. But the range of bids, this was the low bidder, and the high bid was about $550,000. So there was a significant range in the bids we received. But this would be to fit the timeline. They asked us, in order to issue the contract, they wouldn't do so unless we awarded the bid this evening.
Oh.
And then because the start of the work, we're hoping is April 3rd, and it's in order for them to get bonding and securities to the district. They, unfortunately, like, I thought I would have had it sooner, but I just got the recommendation today.
When's the expectation that that work would be complete?
It would be, so we have an end date of July 30th to allow the district flexibility if we want. So some of the work is happening behind Reynolds Field, and it actually changes some piping that runs through or on the side of Reynolds Field and on some sidewalks and things. So initially, we were thinking of starting the work, kind of taking a pause to not impact the field. But now I think the recommendation is just to kind of do it, and then it would take about 5 weeks. But I think initially the schedule called for breaks in construction, and the thinking now may be a bit different. So we may want to, because there's also concern if there's significant rain in the spring, we could have damage. So getting the work done and kind of closing down the field, even if it's for a month, is going to, like, minimize the risk of anything happening there during construction.
And so it would line up, it sounds like it would line up that it would be done before the next hurricane season at least would start. So
Yes, and only because during the spring, there's some, we have the flexibility if the district had felt we needed the use of that field and we wanted them to stop work in the actual field area, we wanted, like, some flexibility in that, but in discussions with just looking at what we need, we feel like we can kind of shift some things at the Burke and, for a few weeks, so we can get it done sooner than later.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question on that
Maureen?
item, actually. Did you say that
the bids closed on the 9th, and are they only honoring it until tonight? Is that what you said?
No, no, so what, sometimes, we can, based upon the low bid and us acknowledging that they would be the recommended bidder, some contractors will be able to secure the insurances and start the contract process. So all this is saying, we're awarding the bid, but we're not in a contract yet. For purposes sometimes of their own ability to secure like the required insurance requirements for the job, they need to have this kind of like, okay, we are like, that we don't say, oh, we're not going to award the bid. So they had asked us to do this in order, because I think initially we were like, oh, we'll just put it on the 28th, we'll have the contract and all that. But they said, can you please do this so we can kind of start our process? They didn't feel comfortable executing a contract to the district without us acknowledging that they were the low bidder, lowest responsible bidder, and we would be willing to award the contract to them. We still, say if the contract was, there was something in the contract, we would not be held to, this. We could just say, we're not gonna, move forward.
This is the award, and then the other is notice to proceed, is that?
Yeah, notice to proceed
Yeah.
with the contract, yes.
Yeah.
So-
Is this the one that had potential FEMA money, or am I confusing
So
it with
there is
something?
some, we did receive some FEMA money, but this is like an upgrade of we're gonna see what we can get back, but I think similar to the village, a lot of upgrades, FEMA doesn't cover us. They cover damage, but they don't cover like full like redesigns of things, even though, quite frankly, it protects from them having to pay for damages. So interestingly enough, there's not, they haven't given us a straightforward answer whether they would, how much they'll give us on this, but similar to the village, we had to kind of proceed because without doing so, we're risking, there was a lot of damage done to there was erosion, which some of it was covered, but some of the pipe system is inadequate for the volume of water now coming through there.
I
With the
remember,
upgrades
yeah.
that have been done in the village, the water coming down now into our property, the volume is increased. Because they needed to do it to kind of, similarly, they had to upgrade their pipes. So now we have to upgrade ours. So we have a claim in. I'm not sure what we'll get back, in terms of this upgrade. But we will submit it after.
Okay, and then my last question was there a possibility we could share the money with the town? Did we talk about that at one point, and could we
So-
memorialize that?
Yeah, so the agreement, so the town, many moons ago, gave us the property, known as Reynolds Field, and there was there is some, language in there that spoke about different kind of repairs and upgrades and maintenance and use of the property, and that agreement is the same one that was entered into at the time of the transfer, and some of it has been, so in other words, technically, some of the language would have suggested that every time we did anything there, they would pay, half of it, and I think our legal interpretations, we haven't really adhered to that initial, agreement, so right now, and historically, we've been responsible financially for all upgrades on that property. And they did so many significant upgrades, and I think then it's kind of protecting not only our property, but the people that are below us also, and protecting the district. So I think, it seems as though that we didn't pursue that as a share, based upon the understanding of how we've been operating in the last 25 or 30 years or so, or more, or longer, actually.
I mean, I
So,
guess
yes.
if there's a way to explore it that doesn't hold up the contract, just in the sense that this is not kind of regular maintenance and responsibilities, this is more of a major project, sometimes that
Sure.
makes a different set of rules.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think we can kind of discuss it just in terms of the work, but we did kind of explore as we looked at the work that we understood we needed to do as a result of some erosion, and then some of the upgrades as a result of kind of the projects. I mean, actually, this particular fix, there's other things that we may need to partner with the village, other drainage systems that exist under Reynolds Field that something like that, I believe we would need to partner with them. But I guess we could explore that, Bill, right? I'm sorry, Bill. But we could maybe explore that in the future. Thanks.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any other questions, comments, items 1 through 9?
I just have a
Lorraine?
question. Who is Colleen O'Sullivan? I didn't understand when I read the contract to provide transition services. What did she do? It's, sorry, number 4.
So this is from the special ed department. Let's just kind of look at this quickly.
Oh, okay, it's a special ed thing? Okay, got it, that's fine. Okay, and my other question is, I see that we have the number 6 and 7 is for the, our voting. Do we have to pay for that? State doesn't pay for that?
Well, we pay for the moving of the machines and and the actual ballots themselves, like the materials. So the machines themselves, we just pay for the moving of the machines.
So it's not that significant a
No,
cost?
and then we pay for all the people who have to work the elections. I think
Yeah.
it's like 12,000 per election or so.
But these are for our own elections.
Correct.
This is
Yeah.
for when
I
we're
know, but
running
still,
our
I
own
would think that,
elections.
like,
We could do it by paper.
why can't the state pay for that?
A hat?
Right,
I've seen boxes where,
totally. Everybody can just say, will just raise their hands.
like your look.
Maybe like a caucus or some sort of caucus, is that what you?
I get it, I was just curious.
All right.
Thank you, I'm okay.
I'd like to thank HEF for number 1, for Sweethearts and Heroes. They will be covering the cost. So while you see the invoice as a business item, that's a HEF grant, and we're
That
really
is
grateful
amazing.
for a wonderful
I
partnership.
saw the photos.
Anytime somebody donates $11,000 that doesn't come from district coffers, it's much appreciated. So thanks for that shout out to HEF.
That's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Business items 1 through 9? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 9?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to placement and services for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve our placements and services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Personnel, we're looking at this as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding our appointments or retirements or amendments? I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve our personnel agenda, appointments, amendments, and retirements?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
If I might just make a mention, we're quite fortunate to have Sarah Stern joining us in a full role. Arrived here in the leave replacement for one of our prized members of the community, maybe ever, in Ross Abrams, and now we have a retirement row veteran in Josh Blum, and in a sense that's the seat that Sarah will go into. She came to us with immense experience and is, from everything we can tell, blended in wonderfully into the English department, and had extremely strong support. The conversation at the end, really just sort of a icing on the cake conversation with Melissa and me was wonderful and unprompted, and I'll end on this, at least for me, unprompted, she spoke to the collaborative spirit and the help she was receiving from Ross, Josh, and others in coming in, and also then said, I love the autonomy I have here, and I hope you will continue that, quote unquote, and that was unprompted. So we're very pleased to have her here.
Excellent. That sounds like a good fit. So, definitely. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, approval of minutes from our meeting just a week ago. Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the March 7th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to committee reports. Facilities. I guess, Maureen, I'll go. We had a facilities meeting, I guess it was about 5 weeks ago now. We had a presentation, we're doing, the state requires a 5-year plan, would that be accurate to say, right? And as part of that, we engaged with a firm, I guess 16 months ago, maybe it would be, to do an entire space audit of what we have and really look at the integration of the programs that we have, the programming we might want to offer in the future, the enrollment we might look at in the future. And we didn't, that comprehensive report's coming down, right? But part of that came out of that report was a presentation by our athletic director and pulling in from all the coaches, looking at the athletic facilities, and the recommendation that the district consider a modern turf field at Burke. And the timeliness of that presentation was also because we have some community partners, I think it's in ASO, that would help fund a portion of the costs of putting in that field. And that's what we discussed. What else did we cover?
You know, I think for the most part, we focused just kind of, I try to give some sense of, you know, what was coming out of that planning session with all the administrators. And as you had mentioned, we had been previously even to this this update to the 5-year plan, we have in the past been approached by ASO, even not even a few years back, saying, you know, they have money and I guess they would have the ability to, if we were ever to consider that. So it kind of, so it was tied in, and as they were aware, or, you know, came back and said, it, you know, as you're thinking about this, just know that if you were to do it, there'd be some money. I think one of the other items we did talk about was facilities usage of outside groups a bit. We did, and more in terms of, and I do have to come back to the board with some numbers and some thinking around it. So there were a couple of things we love, and we have every inch of each building is used, like all, especially Hillside, from the end of school till later in the evening by a lot of different outside groups, and more so than many of our counterparts. And in light of just kind of the cost of energy and some of those things, we were, you know, kind of considering, you know, should we be kind of looking for just to increase some of those fees? Again, just to really cover costs, because the lights on Hillside in particular are on, you know, all evening. In addition, we have some real concerns around security at both buildings in the evening, and although we have security in this building for a portion of the evening, which is really based upon things that go on here in the evening, Hillside really is exclusively after-school programs that are using our building after 4 o'clock. We would like to require security to be there. We have had multiple issues this year with people being around the building, trying to break in the building from outside groups. We've had staff members who have come upon people breaking into vending machines and things like that. So we really need to have higher level security in the evening, and you know, just not only for, you know, we don't want anything broken, but honestly to protect people who are, you know, cleaning our building are not here to secure, to be, you know, having to run security at the same time, and especially at Hillside, you know, that's been something that's been brought to me, and you know, just people kind of wandering in on them and things around the building, and parents. So the long and short of it is that was something that was discussed. We have to have another facilities meeting to kind of solidify that, because the groups, if we agree that we're going to pass on just some of the cost of security or require the security, and it'll be split across all the groups, of course, with some monies toward maybe some of the lighting, or we have air conditioning in every room that, you know, and is being used in certain parts of the year, so that they can plan, because that would impact maybe the cost of their programming. So that was another big topic, and it's tied to the budget. So if it's approved, then we may make some adjustments on our fee schedule in terms of our revenues.
And that would come down likely as part of that comprehensive report?
I think I'll get something to maybe, we'll try to get a facilities meeting possibly on the books before next meeting, and I'll propose a schedule to you based upon kind of working up the numbers. I mean, first I wanted to see whether you would be in support of that before we started to say what the cost of that would be, and how we see that potentially as breaking down across the various groups.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add one thing, and one of the interesting things that came up that you pointed out in that meeting was that there are many districts that pretty much the only thing that happens in the buildings are district activities, and Hastings is quite unique in really making the buildings available, like you said, year-round, you know, throughout the entire day, so that we actually we support a very large ecosystem of opportunities for the community, and that's something that we have to.
I think we're maybe one of the only districts that's in the quad that has River Arts using the building. And there's been other, like I'm saying, there's just been kind of things, and we have concerns, and quite frankly, there are students, and some of them they are still our students, so we want to make sure that there's security, also to make sure that they're safe from people being, leaving doors open is not what we want to be doing, so.
No, for sure.
Of course, that's terrible.
Any-
So right now, you were specifically talking about building use, but some of the other folks that we heard from that particular evening happened to be folks who played pickleball. And so one of the
Oh,
things
that's
that came
right.
up in terms of like use of the courts is that oftentimes people want to use it during non-school hours where we don't have security present. And so I'm wondering if you think if there's a usage fee, if that would also implicate people who use our basketball courts and people who use our tennis courts, and for the pickleball people, they wanted to like adjust the nets appropriate to the sport that they play. And so would that also be included in terms of like, I mean, I'm not saying that that's something we should do. I'm just asking the question, if that's something that you imagine would also be shared with us in terms of other fees that might be introduced.
Yes, yes, you're right, I forgot about the pickleball, and just broadly, all the outside groups. So, yes, that we would be looking to, it would be a bit different, but with that group, we do want to allow full access to our courts. So we had kind of discussed, is there something we could partner with the village, even if they would collect fees to monitor the use of those courts? Then we would be more comfortable, just because we just don't want, the nets adjusted and things like that. But if there was, we do want to look for an opportunity, whether it be in that instance, doing something with the village, that they can either handle it so there's no cost incurred to us. But even with ASO, and I think that's been part of the discussion, there's a lot of wear and tear in our fields also. And there's some concern, not so much them, just all the groups. And actually, Little League, to their credit, did donate $40,000 to the district this year to address field usage. So I think we want to continue to kind of explore ways in which we can share some costs. That was they actually approached us, which was even better. But as we look at the outside groups, maybe we will want to look at ways to either they can kind of give money towards maybe just maintenance, or, some of the materials that are needed to keep the fields and outdoor facilities up to what we want them to be.
I would just add, it is standard practice in the buildings, industry, right, that you recoup costs. So I would fully support that, especially say something like the camp. If you're running HVAC, that could be very costly, right? Utilities
And
are water, right? So I think most programs would be willing to pay their share if they had time to budget, right? So I think that's timely. A quick question on insurance. How does that work? Do you get a certificate of insurance from the users? Like, that's a requirement?
Yes, so you can't, no one, even including the village, can use our property without giving us a certificate of insurance with us as named as, giving us additional coverage.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about facilities? Nope. All right. Moving on to second read. This is the, we saw it a week ago, the comprehensive sort of overhaul and clarification of the concussion management policy / protocol. Any questions or comments? We're going to be voting on this one. Nope. Is there a motion to approve our policy number 5421 on concussion management?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to second public comment. All right. No public comment. Moving on to agenda review for our next meeting, which would be the 28th of March. Is that correct? Yeah.
Right. Nothing's changed since last week, other than, let me just repeat that the 28th is your next meeting of this month, and that'll be a second major budget presentation from Maureen, and that will be your primary item in that meeting. It just related, two nights later, we'll have a public forum on the budget that the PTSA SEPTA is sponsoring for us. It will actually be at Hillside. I think materials are out and about on that. Not on your agenda, but related.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up for Board of Education comments.
I just want to say, related to the PTSA meeting, Bill, is that also listed in the mid-year update, that there is also going to be a gender discussion at Hillside on the same day. I'm wondering if that can be moved in case there are people who would like to attend both.
Well, that's a good setup question, because we've actually designed it so that the budget will follow that presentation.
Okay.
Tightly scheduled, so we're hoping, the budget right now, session's listed for 7:15. We believe the gender session will end at 7. And
it.
even if it overruns a little bit late, we'd rather keep it in the same place.
Got it. As long as it's not overlapping.
Exactly.
That's okay. Great.
Yeah,
Terrific. Thank
We
you.
originally thought about having it elsewhere in the district, but thought that doesn't make sense. We might actually encourage attendance
Yeah, right.
for one or both.
Okay, great. Thank you for
Good question,
considering that.
thank you.
Any other board comments? No? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little hasty. All in favor? Aye, sorry. I want to speak under 9, we're at 8:59. All in favor? Aye, okay.
Aye.
You get a bonus.